Welcome back to Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And we are broadcasting from the Thacker Jewelry Studios. Start your story with engagement rings and wedding bands from Thacker Jewelry, online at thackerjewelry.com. We want to get directly to the phones. We've got Dr. Nick Bergfeld on from Texas Tech University. And Dr. Bergfeld, I wasn't able to talk to you last time, so I'm excited to talk to you. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Matt. Doing good. Great to be back on here, and happy Friday to everybody.
Yeah, Fridays are always nice. So the reason, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have you on again is because we had impact fees. They passed through the Lubbock City Council, and I know that your Lubbock Compact has talked about impact fees, but when you were emailing me, it didn't sound like Lubbock did exactly kind of what y'all were thinking they were going to do.
Yeah, Matt, and this was a tough one. So this was a knockdown, drag-out fight with the real estate developer community of Lubbock since the summertime. And, what the Lubbock Compact had been advocating for was essentially fairness, that the city had the ability to enter into essentially a one-to-one cost-sharing agreement for new roads to these sort of subdivisions that are being built in the southern parts of the city. And, here's the thing, these new subdivisions that are being built, over the long run, they're actually going to be financial burdens on the city of Lubbock to begin with. And so what we were saying was, let's be reasonable about this. If we're going to build these unsustainable neighborhoods, then let's at least make sure that developers are paying their fair share into this process. And where it finally came down to was rather than this one-to-one cost sharing, instead, for every $3 Lubbock citizens are going to put into these roads, the developers only have to chip in $1. And, as part of this process, I think one of the big realizations was just how difficult it is to have these types of conversations with the city council when we don't really have good representation of the city of Lubbock. And so this is something that is now moving forward for the compact in this coming year is around charter reform. The city's very, very outdated charter, and specifically saying, look, we need to open up the democratic process for getting elected officials here that are more representative of the citizens. We need to make sure that anybody in the city of Lubbock with the talent and the mindset and the drive to run for office has that opportunity to. So we've been trying to push forward on this because, this aspect here, what a lot of people don't realize is that our city council, they're not paid. They get about $25 a month.
Yep.
And the challenge is we're just too big. We're too big of a city now where we can be run this way. There are, on a frequent, routine basis, decisions that our city council makes that have multi-million-dollar taxpayer implications. Impact fees being the most recent one. And for those that are interested in this story, in the last second amendment, so the second reading of this bill, everything is sort of said and done. We're kind of, looking at this, thinking about, what we've achieved, what we haven't. And at that last reading, an entirely new amendment that radically changed the nature of impact fees was passed by the city council at the last second. And multiple city council members even stated that they did not even understand what it was that they were voting on. We can't keep operating this way. As a city, we need individuals that are really going to be advocating on behalf of all of our citizenry. And the challenge there is that if you, don't have the financial wherewithal to do that, why is that the barrier to being an advocate for Lubbock citizens? So one of our focuses for this upcoming year, the city is currently going through a charter reform review process. We're very thankful that they're engaging in that. City staff is going to get back to them, and they're going to hear a presentation on this in February. But at the end of the day, citizens, we're going to vote for this charter reform. And so what it is that we're advocating for is for citizens to consider a living wage. So a living wage in the city of Lubbock for a city council member, we're benchmarking that on the United Way's survival wage. So the United Way of Lubbock says the survival wage for a typical household in Lubbock is about $51,000. And, that puts us on par with, say, a city like Laredo, which is almost about the exact same size as us. That's around the payments that their council receives as part of their service. And that's just the thing is, if we're not paying our elected officials, I can guarantee you from my experiences in this, someone is. And the question then becomes, who is it that's actually making determinations about these very important policy choices in our city?
So, Dr. Bergfeld, I just want to say I've made it very clear on this radio station as well as other places that I'm completely against impact fees. But one thing that I can definitely stand behind is fixing the city charter and paying our city councilmen. One of the problems that we have, you have to have either it is a 40-hour week job if you're doing it right. I've even talked to Paul Bean about this, Paul R. Bean, and he was a city councilman for a long time, and he said that it actually costs him about $20,000 a year to be a councilman because of all the gas and other things that you have to pay for out of your own pocket. And so he said even if you just paid them $20,000 a year, it would at least help somebody break even. But what we have right now is something where only people who are wealthy or retired and have time on their hands are eligible to become a councilman or the mayor.
Right, and that's the huge challenge here is that we're a city that's more diverse than that. We've got a lot of working class folks. In that United Way report on survival wage, they peg something like 43% of Lubbock citizens are either below the poverty line or just simply struggling to get by with what they call ALICEs, asset light, income constrained employed. These are the working class, the working poor, honestly, of the city of Lubbock, who struggle if they had a $200 emergency bill. And you think about the cost of getting COVID these days, things like that. There's so many ways that individuals essentially can be knocked off their feet, prevented from being able to work, to be able to provide. And so when we think about the city council, why are those experiences not valid? Why are the experiences of those individuals not ones that are allowed to have a voice in our democratic process here? And it's a frustration because we've got to get to the point where our city council and the decision making and the process that they're going through, and on the impact fee thing, the only thing I'll say there is it was embarrassing to see the council adopt an amendment that none of them understood what it did. That when I think about the level of the city that we are, the size of our metropolitan area, that should never happen again. We need individuals who are passionate, who have the financial safety to be able to focus on the work, to dedicate themselves to being great civil servants to our community. And that to me is the thing is we have to find a way to be able to open this up in a greater sense. And with charter reform, another aspect of this is the citizen petition process, which is another kind of component we're sort of pointing out as being very, very outdated. So I think a lot of people now have probably heard about the sanctuary cities effort. And behind the scenes, when you're thinking about the citizen petition process, this mechanism is very, very antiquated. So it hasn't been reformed in many, many years. What it effectively does is it says the number of signatures that citizens in Lubbock have to collect to put an ordinance in front of our city council is based on election turnout in the most recent local election. Right. Now, here's the thing. Those numbers fluctuate wildly. And so the Sanctuary Cities effort, they required, it was around 3,600 or so signatures to turn those in to get this process going. Now, because of the election that's just occurred, it's over 21,000 signatures.
Right.
Why is participatory democracy suddenly fluctuating so wildly based upon that? Most cities, they peg this to population size. And not only that, but they have a mechanism to make sure that the things with which we are going to be putting on a special ballot initiative, which is what's going to happen with the Sanctuary Cities effort, that the things that we're voting on are legal, right? That there's a process that they vet these so that we don't go through a highly symbolic, incredibly costly process of having Lubbock's general citizenry vote on something that is immediately illegal against state law as well as unconstitutional. And so we need to reform these processes. There wasn't a lot of thinking about this whenever these aspects of the charter were made, but we need to modernize. We need a efficient process for citizens to be able to directly through participatory democracy sign petition signatures, get an ordinance in front of the city council to express the will of the people. but we need mechanisms in place to make sure that we're doing this responsibly. You know, and,
Well,
and
but
I think about
now
yeah.
I do want to say this when it comes to the sanctuary city for the unborn thing. At least, and this is my big thing, is it's going to go in front of the Lubbock citizenry. It's not something that I mean, it's not something that's just automatically going to go through. There is going to be a vote on it.
Right, and that to me is, you know, we need to keep that. We need special ballot initiative capability, because there are times when the will of the people of Lubbock, where for one reason or another, our elected officials are not hearing that, and to have the ability to make sure that policy through the ballot is a possibility. You know, the challenge here really is just sort of on a bigger level, thinking about how do we make sure that we efficiently vet from a legal standpoint the policies and the ordinances with which we're going to put through this process, and that's where the challenge becomes within this. You know, and so I think about this from the context of, you know, the groups that have effectively put forward the sanctuary cities process. You know, they were able to organize through a handful of some of our more hardline evangelical churches. And the thing is, you know, once you understand how this process works, you know, what's sort of the next step in this? This is, if you heard the public hearing meeting, you know, some of the individuals talking on this issue, you know, one woman called Lubbock the city of darkness. They cursed the city council. You know, it goes beyond the pale in terms of the type of rhetoric that we need to see in a city like ours. And this is the challenge. You know, what then becomes the next things that get passed, or the next things that we get forced on through this process, you know, are other sort of symbolic stances. It wasn't that long ago that Lubbock was a dry county. I know that there are a lot of people in our city that would feel, you know, going back to something like that would make a lot of sense. You know, I myself am a libertarian, and so when I think about these types of sort of moral stances that we're trying to sort of put on the citizens, things that are essentially illegal that we then as taxpayers have to pay just for these sort of grandstanding political stances that politicians want to make, you know, it becomes a challenge. We can't let this very, very special process for citizens being able to have their voices heard in policy, we can't let that be co-opted by groups that just simply want to posture.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bergfeld, I'm sorry. We got to take a really quick break. We'll come back, and we're talking to Dr. Nicholas Bergfeld from Texas Tech University, part of Lubbock Compact. We'll be right back. And we're back here on News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO, Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. We're going to go back to the phones with Dr. Nick Bergfeld from Texas Tech University. Dr. Bergfeld, one of the questions I have is what is next? What's coming up next for Lubbock Compact? I know that you worked for, as far as the impact fees, that was something that y'all were working on. What's the next big thing that y'all are trying to get done?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, first we were advocating for, at the beginning of the year, the city sets a series of priorities of issues that they want to try to deal with over the coming year. And so, you know, we got involved in that process specifically to advocate on the charter reform issues. And so, you know, for us, the impact fee issue, that's not a closed book. Right. There's a review process for impact fees that will occur subsequently every about 6 months or so. We'll continue to engage in that and continue to advocate on behalf of Lubbock citizens and taxpayers for that. The focus really is going to be on charter reform, making sure that Lubbock citizens understand just sort of where we're at right now as a city, you know, why it is that we need to advocate for a living wage to make sure that anybody in the city of Lubbock can move into a position of being an elected official and advocating on behalf of all of us. And then looking at these kind of other pieces. So, you know, I mentioned the citizen petition process. We need to modernize that. You know, I think it should be a lot easier for ordinances to get in front of the city council. So that should be, we should be able to sign petitions online. Now, all of this is still vetted through the county clerk's elections office to make sure that the signatures are valid, things like that. But we need to be able to make sure that it's easier for people to participate in petition processes. And then we need some kind of mechanism to make sure that the ordinances that are being put forward are ultimately going to make sense for Lubbock citizenry, rather than sort of symbolic statements, things that are actually going to impact our everyday lives in a way that makes sense, and then also just simply because it costs money, right? It costs taxpayer money to run special ballot initiatives. This is going to be quite costly, and we need to make sure that whenever we're going through that type of process, we're being good.
Dr. Bergfeld, I'm sorry, we ran out of time, but thank you so much for coming on today.